variables and its declaration. So what is a variable? A variable is a named storage location in memory that holds a value. In JavaScript, variables are used to store data that can be manipulated and accessed later in your program. Variables can hold different types of data such as number, string, objects, arrays, and many more. How to declare a variable in JavaScript? We have three different ways to declare a variable: var, let, and const. Okay, each keyword has different scoping rules and behaviors. Let us discuss it one by one. So for that, let me open my JS Fiddle code playground again. So here, let A means I am declaring a variable. Till this point, it don't have any value, right? From this, you will understand that yes, A is a variable, means a naming memory location. But till now, it don't have any value. So if I write here console log A to log the value of A, it return me undefined, right? The value is still not defined here. Correct? Now, let me write here A equal 10 and run this again. So now I can see the value 10. Why? Because I assigned a value. So value can be assigned through equal operator to a variable. Okay? And this declaration, this is our declaration statement, and this is our initialization statement, right? But both we can combine like this. Suppose name is a variable and I wrote the name as Ramesh. So it combines both declaration and initialization statement, right? If I console log name, then I can see Ramesh and this value of A is 10. Okay, so both are working fine. Now let me change it with var instead of let and run this. Okay, is there any change? No, there is no change. Now let me change it a little bit. Suppose I will put a curly brace here. Okay, and write here console.log A and let us run it now. Still there is no change, right? 10, 10 and Ramesh. So this console log A is returning 10. This one is returning 10 and this one Ramesh. Okay. Let me write it like this and now run it. Is there any change? No, there is no change. But now let me change it with let okay and run this one. So see, this output changed. Let A equal 10 and console log A returns 10, but here console log A returns undefined instead of 10. Why? Because this A is block scoped. So this curly brace represents a block, and within block I have another A variable. So this A variable and this A variable differs to each other, right? Let us take an example. Suppose I say Subrat. So Subrat is my name, but in the world there may exist other persons with the same name Subrat, but their scopes are different, right? Similarly here, both the names are same, but their scopes are different. This A, its scope is within this block, and this A's scope is within this block. So if we remove this declaration here, and now let us test it again. Now we are getting 10 and 10 for both. Why? Because there is no declaration statement here. There is only initialization statement. So now this A refers to this one. Okay. So it matters. You have to think it in this way. Okay. But what about where? So in this case, var will run as expected, but if we add a declaration statement here, then it still works the same. Means it is not creating a new variable. Still we are trying to create one, right? We intended to declare it again here, but it does not work because where is function scoped, it is not block scoped. Okay. Now let us see another example. Suppose I have declared a variable with a name, and after 100 or 200 or 500 lines, I don't remember that exactly, and want to and redeclared it. Okay. So when I run it, okay, it is allowing me to redeclare the variable again, but it should not be. Let me see here what happened. Maybe just fiddle. Okay. During TypeScript, it is not throwing me that error, but here you can see in JavaScript, it is saying me that identifier A has already been declared. Okay, and if I try to run it, it will throw me an error. A has already been declared. Okay, but let me change it to var and see whether I can face that error or not. Okay, there is no error. So we can redeclare the variable again and again using var. It will not throw any error. To overcome this issue, they implemented let, which will throw an error if you try to redeclare it. Okay, so that's why we should always try to use let instead of var to avoid these type of confusions. Now what is const? If I write here const a, so it is a declaration statement, right? Then a equal 5, it is an initialization statement. But it is showing me unexpected token, parsing error. Why? Because a const value cannot be assigned. So during declaration, you have to assign the value to it. Now console.log a and run it. Clear the console and run it again. It is displaying me 5, right? But if I try to redeclare it, then I can't, because I have specified const here. So if you don't want the value to be changed in a later stage, then you can declare it as a const. Okay. So now you got a brief idea about var, let and const. Now what is hoisting? So hoisting is a vast concept, but let us discuss it in brief so that you will get a basic idea about it. Now, let me write here console.log a and then var a. Okay, and run it. It is showing me undefined, right? But if I don't declare it, then it will throw me an error. A is not defined. Okay, means at least I have to define it. But if you look at here, this is defined in second line, not in first line. Means when it is trying to assess A, at that time A is not defined, right, in our program. But still it is able to assess it. Why? Because var use hoisting. Okay, so variables declared with var are hoisted to the top of the scope. Okay, in which scope it is declared, it will move to top of that scope. Means you have written it in second line, but it will automatically move to the top line. Okay, you think it in this way. Okay, but let us do the same thing with let and see what happens. So in this case, let also hoist it, but it will go to temporal dead zone. So it don't define any value. For that reason, it will say cannot assess A before initialization. It is not initialized. Okay. But if I initialize here, then also it will say me the same thing. Why? Because it is used before its initialization. Okay. But if I remove it completely, then it will throw me the error that A is not defined. Okay. So what does it mean? That if you are using let or const, then also it is hoisted, means the JavaScript now knows that there is a variable named A, but it is not initialized at the time of use. Okay, so it means first you have to initialize it, then you can use it. Okay, and it is actually a best practice, right? Why we will use a variable before its initialization? We are not mad, right? It definitely may be an error. Okay, so we forgot to declare it, we forgot to initialize it, and we used. If it is declared at a later stage, okay, it may be after 100 lines or 200 lines, but in the same scope. So what does it mean? It means that variable may be another, declared for another purpose, not for this purpose. Okay, so if something is hoisted with its value to the top of that scope, then sometimes it may be useful, but most of the times it may lead to an error. That's why for this reason also we should use let and cost in our program instead of where. Okay. Now hoisting variables declared with const are hoisted but not initialized, resulting in a reference error if SS before declaration. Now different examples I have already explained you regarding this, but you can still pause the video and read this. Now key points to remember. Where use when you need function scope variable or need to redeclare variable within the same scope. Be cautious of its hoisting behavior. So I will suggest don't use it. Instead of where, use let. Let use for block scope variable where you might need to reassign the variable value later. But if you don't need to reassign it later, then use const. And both are block scoped. Okay. Now, this is an example. You can pause it and write it in your online compiler to run this one. So a function created called example function, and to run it simply you can type that function. Now let us see its TypeScript format. So var x, then this column number means this variable is intended to store only number values, nothing else. Okay, so you cannot store string here. It will throw an error. Similarly, here, if we will run more about if in our later classes, but here I will simply explain you what is if. It is based on a condition. If something is true, then something will happen. If something is false, then something will happen. Okay, you can remove it and directly use a block like this, but it is not meaningful. So for that reason, in this example, I have mentioned this if. Okay, so very simple, right? JavaScript, TypeScript, only mention the types. Gradually, you will be acquainted with it and will be very familiar with TypeScript. And most of the job openings, they are asking for TypeScript nowadays, not JavaScript. Remember this.